Hey there, I'm Robin Haston with Sweet Lotus Holistic Health, and today I'm here to talk to you a little bit about hormones and what happens as we approach and reach the age of 40 or so, and even beyond that. So if you're not familiar with our hormones, just know that there are over 150 in the body and that they are messengers to our organs and systems, and they help regulate a lot of things in the body. And those include our metabolism, our reproductive system, our blood sugar, our blood pressure, our appetite, our energy levels, our sex drive, our aging, our sleep, and more. So this is all connected to our endocrine system, which is our glands, and the pituitary gland is in charge. So the idea of the hormones and those messengers are that the body wants to maintain homeostasis. So this means staying the same. It actually translates almost to like staying at home. So that is what the idea is. And the body continually releases different levels of hormones to try to maintain that homeostasis, whatever the body feels that that is. And so in different phases of life, we have different hormones, right? And we know we go through puberty and our hormones start to increase. If we're female, we get more estrogen and progesterone. And if we're male, we get more testosterone. And then as we approach middle age or midlife, those start to shift a bit. For women, those start to decrease. For men, testosterone starts to decrease. And so we see some changes that are related to this. And we see in menopausal women, we have a lot of difference in moods, and even in men that are midlife, like we see things that happen around this time as the hormones begin to shift. Remember what puberty is like, and if you've been around a teen or a preteen, you remember this well. And then we go, of course, into our stage of life where we are procreating or we're having children or not, and then we start to age a bit. So in menopause and middle age, our hormones are up to 75% lower than they are during our sort of fertile years, meaning like our late teens, our 20s, and even our 30s. And so that's a huge reduction, and you'll see major changes start to occur. It also can increase weight around the middle. So this is a big symptom that we have of people that are in this middle age bracket, is we start to see that weight around the middle, and that increases our risk of high blood pressure, heart disease, memory loss, and diabetes, especially diabetes. The belly fat around the middle can be an indicator of what we call insulin resistance. So I want to talk mainly about menopause and its effect on the hormones, but this can apply to men too. So if you just replace estrogen and progesterone with testosterone for men, you get about a lot of the same effects. So as those hormones reduce, what happens to, remember, we're maintaining homeostasis, so some go down, something else has to go up. Well, the things that start to increase are insulin, cortisol, and oxytocin. Now, ideally, oxytocin is a good hormone, but we'll get into the other first, okay? So what does insulin do in the body? Insulin affects our other hormones greatly, but basically what happens is it signals the cells to soak up glucose. Glucose is blood sugar. Glucose is what our body changes food mainly into. So anything we eat that has sugar or carbohydrates, that is what our body turns into glucose, and that is our main source of fuel for most people. So as we age, we have more insulin, and what happens is the cells get resistant to it. There's so much in the blood sugar in the blood already, they can't take it all in, they can't listen to all those messages, and so the cells begin to resist the insulin, or it creates what we call insulin resistance. And so that creates higher blood sugar, and this leads to diabetes. The liver converts the glucose to fat. So we have too much blood sugar, too much sugar in the blood. We can't absorb it into the cells to use it for energy. Then the liver senses that there's too much, and so it starts to convert it to fat, and then we store that fat. And so that can cause belly fat, and then belly fat is an indicator of this. And so those two start to kind of feed each other. So women approaching menopause have a harder time metabolizing carbs. And so the insulin resistance happens. So we take in too many carbs, too much, sugar, too many sort of basic carbohydrates, and the body can't do anything with it except store it as fat. It can't take it in and use it as fuel, so the liver goes, okay, we better store this for later. The problem is most of us don't need it later. So women that have insulin resistance, it can be linked to hot flashes, fatigue, difficulty concentrating, weight gain, or more serious issues like PCOS, high blood pressure, some cancers, or even Alzheimer's. So they're doing a lot of studies now with Alzheimer's and finding it linked to things like inflammation and this blood sugar issue and insulin resistance. So one of the keys for women is going to be eating less carbs, maybe even going into ketosis or doing what we call the keto lifestyle or the keto diet. We're using fat for fuel, so we're starting to burn that stored fat a bit. We're also converting from insulin resistance to insulin sensitive. And so we want to do that so that when the body releases our insulin, that we immediately soak up any glucose. We use it as energy and fuel for our cells. So usually when we go into ketosis, there's not much of this because we're starting to burn fat for fuel. So minding our insulin is really important. And so looking at yourself, like noticing, what is my diet like? Do I have a lot of simple carbohydrates in my diet? Do I eat a lot of sugar? How do I feel when I eat sugar? Like you can sense if you start to get insulin resistant because you just feel sluggish. And more sugar or more things like that, normally when you're a kid, like sugar causes energy, right? Because they're not insulin resistant. That sugar and that glucose is going right into the cells. It's making the energy. They're bouncing off the walls. I mean, they say, oh, sugar doesn't do that, but we all know that it does. So that's important to notice in yourself. The second main hormone that we want to talk about is cortisol. Now, cortisol is technically a life-saving hormone. Like we need cortisol. It's a key stress hormone. So it is released in the body in response to stress. It boosts our amount of blood sugar, so we have more fuel available. So this would be like if your fight or flight is going on, then you've got that sugar in the blood, you're ready to soak it up and run away or fight for your life, whatever. The problem is that most of us have chronic stress. So it's a lower grade stress, it's all the time. We have constantly that higher level of sugar in the blood. And what do we know about that? Is the cells are less going to be sensitive to insulin. And so that feeds number one problem, our insulin resistance. So the cool thing about cortisol is, again, it's those small amounts that are sporadic. It's the cleanup crew. It actually reduces inflammation in small amounts every now and then. The chronic, low grade, all the time cortisol actually does the reverse and creates more inflammation. So small bursts of cortisol, good for the body, okay for the body. Long, extended cortisol release, not great. So it stops reducing inflammation, it suppresses our immune system, it increases our appetite, it increases acidity, and our gut flora goes out of whack. So we talk a lot about like leaky gut, we talk about people that have digestive issues, like anything they eat, they're not able to digest. This is linked to that high cortisol in the blood, so that chronic stress. Also rapid aging, depression, adrenal fatigue, feelings of loneliness and burnout. This is because the cortisol robs the body of the other hormones. So it leads to a lot of issues. There's less of this automatic regulation of cortisol as we age. Again, it increases our risks for dementia, right? Here we are back to our brain health. Osteoporosis is connected to cortisol, and our metabolic syndrome. So people that no longer can, metabolize food well. This is a big issue out there. And cancers. Again, we're coming back to cancer because it's connected to inflammation. So that elevated cortisol triggers also fat storing enzymes in cells. So we have the insulin resistance, which makes the liver convert the glucose to fat and store it. And then we also have that cortisol that's going, yeah, store more fat, store more fat, store more fat. And so it just keeps looping around and around to each other. Belly fat cells are said to have 4 times the cortisol receptors of other fat cells in the body. So this just keeps feeding this cycle. So that in itself creates insulin resistance. So it's like, does the insulin resistance feed the belly fat storage? Yes. Does the belly fat storage feed the insulin resistance? Yes. So we have this vicious circle of problems with that. It also, cortisol will increase the cravings for sweet and salty in our appetite. So it makes us want to eat more. It makes us want to eat those things that also contribute to the insulin issues. Woo! So the more alkaline we can make our diet, make our bodies, it lowers cortisol. So green leafy vegetables, reducing your stress through lifestyle. I especially say meditation and mindful movement. Creating a life that feels good for you, trying to get your sleep every night. This is all going to help with your cortisol. So the last one in the big 3 is oxytocin. And for some people, this is your favorite subject, right? This is the feel-good hormone. This is the hormone that gets released when we hug loved ones, when we fall in love with someone, or we are in love with someone. We have a steady stream of oxytocin. Ooh, yeah. It's also really good because it's anti-aging. It helps regulate our body weight and our appetite. Obviously, those go hand in hand for most of us. So oxytocin and cortisol oppose each other. So they're hard, we don't really get to have those at the same time, right? And you get that, like you're hugging your child or your beloved family member or your romantic love. And it's hard to feel stressed when you're in that loved up place where you're just like hugging it out. Studies show that oxytocin can prevent insulin resistance. So find your ways to get your oxytocin. It's also involved in satiation, so feeling satisfied. Chronic sugar intake reduces oxytocin. So that's another reason to ditch the sugar. Involved in this also are neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine. So serotonin and estrogen are feel-good hormones and feel-good neurotransmitters. And we know as estrogen starts to reduce in the body, that so does serotonin. One trick is eating probiotics boost your serotonin. So things like pickles and sauerkraut and yogurt, good quality yogurt and kefir. So again, keep that sugar low, but keep those probiotics high. It's going to help with your serotonin. Turmeric prolongs the activity of serotonin. So maybe blend some turmeric into your probiotics or put some in your diet every day. Tryptophan also boosts our serotonin levels. So that's turkey, dairy, sunflower seeds, our omega-3s. You can get those from flax, walnuts, fish oils. That's going to help you feel good too. It's going to boost those serotonin levels. So then there's dopamine, which is also connected to testosterone. And dopamine has to do with pleasure and motivation, right? We all know about dopamine hits from different things. Testosterone obviously connected to our sex drive. So you can see people that have issues with addiction are very connected into that idea of the drive and then the reward, the pleasure, and the motivation. So to keep these levels up too, we want to find ways to get healthy dopamine, healthy testosterone. GABA and progesterone are good for peace and calming, and progesterone acts on our GABA receptors. And so going back to those healthy foods and our probiotics, this is going to help. So in midlife, we have the shifting hormones. They are the enzymes in the gut balance bacteria start to have issues, and we start to have a hard time metabolizing those carbs. And it has a lot to do with that insulin resistance. So even if you're not completely resistant to insulin, you might not be as sensitive as you once were. Meaning that when the body senses the sugar in the blood, the insulin is released to try to get the cells to take it in. The cells are kind of like, some of them take it in, some of them don't. Maybe they take in less than they used to. And this is a common problem as we age. So we want to eat less of those ideally, or maybe really eliminate most of them completely. So for some of us, we don't need the stored fat, right? And so we don't need the carbs, we don't need the insulin, we don't need the cortisol, we don't need the stored fat, right? We don't have anything we're saving up for, right? So it's not like we're saving up for a long winter, or we're saving up for a time of where we're going to be like not eating for days, months, whatever it is. So our low carb diets help with our insulin sensitivity. They help maintain it, which is good for diabetes. They have shown studies that diabetes, type 2 diabetes, can be reversed by doing a low carb or keto diet. If you're curious about that, Google it. You will find studies. It also stabilizes something called leptin, which is an appetite and craving hormone. So it starts to stabilize that in the body, and you start to feel less hungry and less craving the sugar, craving the salty foods, the things that maybe aren't optimal for our health. Low carb diets were initially developed for epilepsy, and that is now used for cancer because cancer cells love glucose, they love sugar. So this is something that I've learned in so many places of my nutrition training, my yoga health coach training, that sugar can lead to cancers, and we need to be mindful of how much sugar we are taking in, not just because of the insulin resistant problem, but because of the idea that sugar literally feeds cancer in the body. So we want to not feed it, right? Want that one to go away. Low carb diets have also been shown to help memory because ketones are good brain fuel. And so if you are curious about changing your diet and lifestyle to one on the low carb train, it can also balance your hormones. It can reduce your inflammation. It actually quickly reduces body weight and recomposes the body. So less fat, especially around the middle, more muscle, more leanness, a lighter feeling overall. And it's not as hard as you think. It's actually very, very simple. So if you're curious, please reach out. I would love to share more. Thanks so much for joining me today for Hormones 101. I hope you have a good one. Bye.